This video is brought to you by Manscaped. Stick around to hear more about the discount they're providing to the entire upper echelon community. New World, the explosive MMORPG from Amazon Game Studios. Some people thought this might be the next big thing. Like me, I was one of those people. Other people viewed it as a generic nothing burger from a novice studio, and still others were of the mind that it would probably be a total disaster, unworthy of their time entirely. I came into New World with hundreds of hours already under my belt. I had played this game on numerous separate occasions, from the preview to the betas, the alphas, and the stress test. I knew what the game was, I knew how it played, and I knew that I would get hundreds of hours of fun. Hundreds more hours, that is, after the initial hundreds on top of that. The thing is, I didn't just want hundreds of hours, I wanted thousands of hours. MMORPGs are some of the most appealing games in the world to me. What they might lack in innovation, they make up for in longevity. And when I dove into New World, I could not have been happier, as that once-in-a-lifetime experience of a fresh, massively popular multiplayer game hit the market. I'd like to admit publicly that I was wrong. I wasn't wrong about those first 200 or so hours, but I was wrong to be hopeful about the many thousands. New World was a broken creature. On the one hand, it possessed elements of player versus player combat, which made the game hypothetically appealing to the hardcore and politically driven. Server politics, I mean, such as those who want to participate in guild combat and Zerg pushes, etc. On the other hand, it had elements of crafting and skill progression that would fulfill the desire of a more casual audience, which seemed very great, like extra great, but in reality, it split the difference and somehow managed to fall in between these major categories, failing to capitalize on its initial, highly explosive interest, leaving it where we are today, nearly 3 months later. Here's the reality. New World has lost roughly 90% of its audience in less than 3 months. Peaking at over 900,000 players in its launch window, it was down to less than 100,000 during peak hours in mid-December. And as I write this video script right now, a winter festival event has gone live, and server merges are taking place, pushing the concurrent players back up over 100,000 temporarily, but by any and all metrics, the game has hemorrhaged players at a rate that is undeniably scary. On the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a trimmer for my balls and PP. All jokes aside, it's the holiday season, so why not give the gift of cleanliness to yourself or a loved one? Trust me, it's worth it. Manscaped is that gift with its new Performance Package holiday offering. The Performance Package comes with a cordless, waterproof trimmer, that's the centerpiece, of course, the Lawnmower 4.0. It comes with Crop Preserver deodorant and Crop Reviver toner. It has the Weed Whacker, which is an excellent nose and ear hair trimmer. I actually really love that one in particular. And it also has a stainless steel luxury nail kit. If you order right now through the link down below in the description, they are also giving away 2 free gifts. Anti-chafing boxer briefs, I'm wearing them as we speak, hence a lack of video footage as B-roll, and a Shed travel bag in addition, free of charge. Again, there's a link down below in the description using promo code UPPER for 2 free gifts with your order. Right about now is when you might need creative gifts for your family. Always, right? Holidays, of course. And Manscaped is the perfect option and solution to that. Big thank you to them for sponsoring the channel. Let's talk about server merges. I can say many things about the developers of New World, but what I can't say is that they didn't plan for this, at least partially. New World was launched with something like 500 servers across the entire world. Those servers were broken down into regions, such as North America East, North America West, Europe, Asia, etc. But within those regions were world sets. World sets were a collection of servers that belonged to the same overarching group, and as an easy example, I will showcase Heliopolis, my own server, which is part of Arcadia Psi. The idea is pretty simple. As the population fluctuates, or more precisely, as it obviously declines post-launch, world sets could have their individual servers merged together to maintain a healthy population. In the background right now, I'm showing footage from today on Heliopolis, and even what was once considered the central hub of the game, Everfall, is a ghost town. Perfect example of what I mean, an invasion, one of the endgame content pillars where the corrupted horde attacks your fort for a series of escalating waves, and if you lose, your benches get downgraded, your crafting benches. An invasion happening in less than 3 hours had only 10 people signed up. That's 1/5 of the capacity that you need. These are activities intended for a raid group of 50 people, which means even during peak hours on the server, and also the territory or the city settlement that is most appealing, kind of like the central economy hub, and at peak hours, again, there was absolutely no chance whatsoever that invasions would get even close to a full group. Again, this was Everfall, the most desirable economy and territory in the game for the bulk of its lifespan. For a territory war, which is a different thing, defining which company owns a settlement, I checked on Windsward, which is directly south, and less than 4 hours out from a war, where previously you might have hundreds of people signed up, there was less than half of a full army. In addition, all of the players signed up were level 60. Not one single person asking to be in the war was a lower level, and this would seem to indicate that at least on this particular server, there are no new players whatsoever rising through the levels and participating in the territory conflict mechanics. At peak hours, Heliopolis is barely cracking 200 players out of a speculative 2,000, and on the low side, less than 30. That simply isn't enough to do anything. It means that anyone who signs up can't find dungeon groups. It means they can't progress through main story quests that require a similarly leveled party. It means the server can't maintain a functional economy. And it means that entire pillars of endgame content like wars or invasions, they are unplayable. Heliopolis is dead until a server merge, which would appear to be right around the corner. Sounds good, right? Wrong. To explain this, I need to discuss an entirely different game called Rend. Rend is a similar title in certain respects, but wildly different in others. However, one of the things that Rend, a simple indie survival game from Frostkeep Studios, had in common when compared to New World is three-way faction conflict. Rend had a 20 versus 20 versus 20 framework, where each side battles the other for victory on a pretty large map. I'm just going to describe what happened and let people draw their own conclusions. When Rend was first released, they didn't have enough servers. Everything filled up immediately and completely. As a response, they began to open a whole bunch of new servers, similar to New World, getting people into the game and temporarily solving the problem. After that, things got really rocky because certain servers were, shall we say, unbalanced. One faction would usually pull ahead and start to control the map, and in response, many players began to leave those servers for something more competitive and even. Once that began to happen, and it began to happen rather quickly, the balance began to skew, and factions weren't able to maintain a critical mass of players online to defend their bases. They were unable to get a solid rolling economy of materials, and eventually, it just snowballed. That server would die out and have 15 people online for one, the controlling or winning faction, 2 people online for the other, and 0 for the third. This was unhealthy and killed nearly every single server over the span of its lifetime. However, every time a server would reset, there would be a huge influx of players. That would lead to queue times, which frustrated everyone, so they would once again spread out to other servers that had a reset in the near future. But the same problem would once again begin to manifest after a couple of days. Everything in Rend was smaller and more sped up when compared to New World. Ultimately, the game saw a series of subsequent activity spikes where short periods of time had populated servers that appeared to be functional, but long term, the game literally died, like it's actually dead. Three-way faction combat required a critical mass of players to be present online at all times, basically, else the dynamics would spiral out of control, right? You couldn't do any of the content you wanted to do, you couldn't go the places you wanted to go. If there weren't enough players at all times, it started to fall off and become less appealing. And hard concurrent player caps that were either exceeded or completely unmet, it was very hard to maintain that kind of threaded needle middle ground there, contributed to a dynamic where the balance was extremely fragile. It was basically like a tiny little precursor to the issues we see in New World, and while it's not a lockstep replica by any stretch, and it's significantly larger numbers here with New World and longer spans of time in between, I believe we are witnessing the same thing that happened with Rend, which is a death spiral. Here's where people almost always compare the game to Elder Scrolls Online. The argument goes a little something like this. Elder Scrolls started big and then died, and now it's a popular game. You're so wrong, it hurts me physically. Ugh. But that's not exactly true. Elder Scrolls, at least for Steam, on Steam charts, actually built from a relatively small player base into a position where it captured 10 times the previous number, and this happened over the span of 7 years. Elder Scrolls Online has three-way faction combat and subsequent reward systems, but it's contained within an isolated environment, and thus is inconsequential for the overall title to actually function. New World is not similar in these respects, and instead it started with 900,000 people and then plummeted to 1/10 of that in a few months. This now requires them to merge server clusters, just as an effort to make sure that people can even play the game properly. And while I do believe those merges will bring back a spike of activity in the short term, there will need to be many of them in order to consolidate the player base. And once consolidated, it might just start bleeding again. One way to put this in perspective is to look at the numbers. Steam Charts has New World peaking at less than 100,000 concurrent players. More now during the holiday event, but that's less relevant long term. Of those 100,000, a healthy chunk are people in menus or AFK. Steam counts people who are just in the main character menu and not actually playing, so whatever number that is has to be subtracted from the overall total. It may not be huge, but it is something. In addition, New World is not immune to bots and gold farmers. In fact, bots are heavily targeting the game, from fishing bots to mining bots, and even programs that can play Outpost Rush, which is one of the more appealing modes in the game, or even do rudimentary quests. that number must also be subtracted from the total because those are not accounts that will be running real content, and they artificially inflate the numbers. One more thing, Steam Charts does not discern between regions. The healthiest population for this game by far is in Europe. In North America, there are minuscule populations on North America East and West compared to the overall server count. And for one final way to frame it, if you were to take the entirety of my old servers cluster, Heliopolis, part of Arcadia Psi, and merge them, it would still be less than 900 players. Not even half the population of one server, which would mean that many of the problems driving players away would still be full on in effect. The Psi cluster isn't alone. Sigma, Alto, Terra, Coral, Radial, Core, and Luft. All of these clusters, not servers, world set clusters combined, are below 1/4 of a single server's population during peak hours. And some are below 1/10. Servers don't just need to merge with each other, they will need to merge into entirely new world sets over and over and over again in an attempt to maintain critical mass. The moment critical mass is not maintained, content falls apart, large swaths of content. Wars, invasions, and even the leveling process itself is degraded because you basically just can't find groups now to complete mid-tier dungeons. The New World player base is almost unilaterally one-sided and top-heavy, and that has economic ramifications as well, like pretty severe ones, which means that they have whittled themselves down to the central hardcore demographic, which might seem good, but that demographic, at least some, is probably going to get tired of the consolidation process. The way I see it, New World is either in, or damn close to, a death spiral. The massive launch day enthusiasm led to knee-jerk decision-making. Those decisions poured gasoline on the flame and accelerated a population decline on certain servers, disabling new characters, allowing the transfers, etc., etc. There were a lot of them. That population decline led to the now emergent consolidation process, which in turn leads to a short-term boost in activity, but only centralizes the process that is already occurring into one place instead of 100. New World, for better or for worse, sits in the middle ground between hardcore PvP title and casual cooperative MMO. A 2,000 player server cap, or whatever it eventually made it to, I heard rumors that they were raising it to 3,000, not sure, but anyways, whatever 1,000 person server cap, and partial hardcore PvP dynamics with 3-way faction systems, that requires a critical mass of players, especially with their isolated economy all over the map. Like, there's so many different things that they did, which basically require there to be a lot of players all the time in all the regions for all the content, otherwise you really can't do all of it. And New World is now bleeding into the red when it comes to server population on the vast majority of all of their worlds. It's possible to reverse this. It's possible to stabilize somewhere down below and have a couple servers per region maybe that maintain a healthy population, but even then it's threading a needle. Because if the interest grows, you have to split servers again because of queue times, which are severely detrimental, or open new ones, and if it shrinks, you have to consolidate. It's like a tightrope balancing act all the time on every single server, and once the balance is lost, it's very hard to get back to it. I am skeptical that New World will be able to solve this issue before losing possibly like 99% of its player base. I doubt it will get shut down per se, but the trajectory here is undeniable, and I wanted to discuss it. Anyway, that's it. If you want support, please check out the links down below. I'm attempting to transition over to Patreon as a primary income stream, so check that if you want to. Also, Odyssey, a YouTube platform alternative where all my content is ad-free. Obviously, Manscaped, click that link, support the channel, support them. Social media, another YouTuber to check out and support. Merchandise, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.